Okay, so I want to first thank all the authors for the very interesting presentation. And it's pretty long, roughly we have 1 hour to cover 9 papers. And we have a bunch of questions asked on the Hua website. So as we mentioned in the beginning of the session, if you have a question, you can either ask at the Hua's website or here at the Zoom Q&A chat box. So let me first check. We have roughly about 10 questions on Hua here. And actually we have, for each question, we can, I think all the audience or participant can vote which question is more interesting or more generic. So let me first copy the first question actually in the Zoom here in the chat box. So in this case, our Q&A here. So, okay. So we're gonna first discuss the question I just posted on this chat box here. I assume all the panelists and the audience can see this question, right? So the first question is that for the paper, let's talk about the place of the interest, the POI, and there may be city area that are ignored by the data set collected because of the discrimination or bias of the data. And any idea how to address that? So I think we have 2 papers about the POIs in particular, right? The first one is probably about the tour together. The second one, let me see, probably we can start with the first paper, talk about the POI. Is the author tour together with us today? Any of authors we see? I see 2 authors in the panelist session here. Can you unmute? Answer a few questions, answer these questions. Let me see. Okay, it seems author is not with us today. Okay, how about the second POI paper, learning from hometown and the current city? So let me see who is the author here. Is the second paper author with us today? Okay, let me pin authors, and during the meantime, I can try to answer this question based on my some of my experience in our paper and based on some reading of those papers. Basically, for the POI release the work, when they do the evaluation, there are 2 types of way when they do it. When they do the cross validation, so they can do the temporal cross validation. They can also do the spatial cross validation. For temporal cross validation, basically they just, for example, they have 4 weeks data. They use 3 weeks data to do the training, 1 week to do the evaluation. This is standard temporal cross validation. And for the spatial cross validation, for example, they have 100 POI sites and 100 users, right? So in this case, they're probably going to use the native users to the training and use the rest of the 10 users to do the evaluation. And then a more rigorous paper, they will do this kind of randomized process between the training side and testing side to see what is the performance here. So basically, for this kind of new POI scenario, if it does not appear to this kind of in the training side, so when the testing site actually appear this new data, new POI, and basically the author in the paper can actually evaluate to see how robust their model is to this new POI. So this is probably the best, I would say the standard approach we have in terms of this evaluating this new location and the new data set. Nobody kind of visited this before. So I'm seeing our tour together. Paper's author is with us now. Can you try to answer this question to see the first question I posted here and the bias of the POIs when you do your field study?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking. It's a great question. So to answer this question, we have to introduce a little bit about our methodology, because according to our methodology, the data actually a little data of place of interest come from crowdsourcing. That is to say, we let the tourists to check in, name the place, and upload pictures, leave comments for that place. So, and then our system will note this place as place of interest. So we believe this methods is able to apply to both urban and rural areas. Yeah, so I hope this can answer this question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
So I'm assuming the hometown and the current city papers author is not with us today. So let's move on to the second question here. And the second question, we have 2 votes here. It's still about a tour together. Let me post here on the Zoom web chat here. So let me try to read it. This tour together and other PY recommendation paper. Did you consider any privacy issue on the real-time location queries and sharing? If so, do you think any of the privacy preserving technique shared by other authors in the session can apply to your paper, to your work? Basically, the privacy and how other privacy protecting technique proposed in this session or in any other kind of related work can be applied to your work to protect the privacy of the user when they share their data.
Yeah, it's a good question, and Fang Yu will answer this question. Thank you.
Sure. Hello, we can hear you. Yes, yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you for asking. Well, I think that Together is like a Facebook check-in, so users can provide their check-in if they want. And it's initiated by themselves, so if they have the privacy concern, they won't provide their sharing locations. And a few participants in our interview mentioned privacy issues and indicated their worry about sharing their location. However, some thought sharing to strangers is safer than sharing to their friends, colleagues, and the relatives. Yeah, so I hope this will answer the question.
Okay, maybe I can follow up a little bit. It's just one short question. I think basically when you do this kind of field study, right, you recruit, if I remember correctly, you recruit more than 100 users, right?
Yeah,
so basically when they actually participate, I think your paper is a little bit different than rest of the paper in the session because your paper is more focused on the qualitative analysis instead of quantitative, right? So when you actually do the survey, do the interview, right? So what kind of incentive you provide to the those kind of user in order for them to participate in your study, and how much effort they have to do? Because for example, when they try to actually go to a new place, right, they try to see things. If you want them to actually share their real-time, video feed or other things experience with other kind of users, will it actually be a huge burden for the user?
Yeah,
I think sorry.
Yeah, I can answer this question, and I will let Fang Yu to give me some additional feedbacks. So as for me, I think, yeah, the method we use in this paper is qualitative interview. And I think the POI is kind of very emotional for our users. So interview is very helpful for us because our interviewee can share what they think about the whole process. And just like we mentioned before in the previous question, our participants tell us some of them have concern with privacy issue, but others feel pressure when they share this their own information with their close friend or families, but they are comfortable to share this with the strangers. So I think in this study, it is very interesting because people have different interests, and based on the qualitative research, we can learn more about insight from the user, and maybe those insights will help us to get further idea of research. Yeah, so it is my thoughts. So how about you, Fang Yu?
Well, I just think about that. When we recruited them, we say that it's a well, it's yeah, it's an experiment, but it's a we will pay them and they'll go to the maybe just have a trip to Danshui, and some of the tourists are very happy for you know they can uh, they can earn money and they can go to travel,
Yeah.
and I think that's an interesting experience for them.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
let me move on to the next question. I think the rest of few questions are pretty generic to all the authors and all the papers. So for the authors who you are here with us today, can you roughly open your camera or let us know you are with us today? So in this case, we can actually have a more active discussion for the panel. Just open your camera or at least let us know in your chat box you are here. In this case, we can direct the question to you. So let me move to the next question with the a few votes here. So I think I put here already. And essentially all the paper related to the mobility and the POI prediction, all the author, can answer this question. So how many days or months of the data generally do we train a model? And in a personalized model and the generic model. So for those two kinds of model, are you using different kind of lengths of the data to train your model and to achieve a stable and effective result? So that's the question, I think, for all the papers and with this training and the testing process. So any authors here want to actually take first shot?
Well, this is Jing of the paper mail. Well, we use a machine learning algorithm using unlike other authors, we do not use federated learning, but we use the gated recurrent unit network to train our model. It takes around different from others, it takes around half an hour to train our network. Yeah, that's our training time.
Okay. So for the personalized model and the general model, do you have any kind of, treat them differently or you treat them like the same when you decide the amount for the training data?
I think it should be different, but in our paper, we train a general model for different users. Yeah, so I'm not very familiar with personalized model.
I see.
You can refer to other experienced authors.
So let me see. I think this is a question probably more appropriate to one of the paper we mentioned here, and extending the coverage for the stationary sensing system. The author is Yu Yang. Yu, are you with us?
Yes. So
can you comment a little bit about this kind of question? The Chun just answered.
Yeah, for this question to like how many data you use for to train the model, I think the most a common practice for us to train the model is like to do the sampling. So in general, we are not like to put all the data together to input the model. When the training, we generally like do some sampling, like do some bench-based training. So in that case, we can generally like train the model in like a general server instead of some very super powerful computer. So that's my experience.
So we have some follow-up here about the question. Actually, the question is about the amount of the data. For example, like you use 1 week or 1 month. So instead of the training time, Chun, can you just briefly comment? Because you mentioned that you have hours the training time, right? Not the data you use, right? Amount of the data, for example, 1 week or like 1 month in general. Yeah.
Actually, we use the geomagnetic sequences to localize as it is more stable and other signals. So actually we collect our data like in an hour around, we use our collected data and like in an hour to train our model. So I think ours is different from others that use with a large time span.
Okay. How about Yu, in your paper, can you comment a little bit about how long the data you use to train the personalized model and the generic model?
So I think that depends on the data we use. If we have like very very dense data, like 1 hour or a few, or 1 hour based time interval or some minutes based interval. So we can train the model like using probably like a few months, just a few weeks and to 1 month data. So, but the data, if like the QI data, so it may be very sparse. Probably one person only like visit a location like probably just every 1 week, something like that. In this case, we may need longer data to do the prediction. Yeah, to do the training. I mean.
It seems we have another papers quite related about the self-predict. Zhou Qin, are you with us? No? Zhou, are you with us? No? Okay. So let's move to next question here. And I think Qun asked a question on here, Zoom Q&A. Is it possible to integrate the augmented reality to the tool together for better user experience? Can the author also answer this question?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking. It's a very interesting question. And I just think about that. As for me, the AR feature is very entertaining, and it will be look like Pokemon Go. So Pokemon Go also encourage people to take picture with imagine monster and integrate the monster with the background and or the interest place. So I believe it's a very interesting and entertaining feature. But for the usability and the user experience about that feature, I believe we need more research to make sure how well people use that feature. And because this feature require a lot of data, right? So as a Pokemon Go user, I have to take about 2 gigabytes per month to play with that AR feature. So a lot of things should be considered. So I believe it is a good idea and deserve further research for that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to next question. So I put here in the chat box Zoom here. It seems like a lot of distributed human mobility modeling paper has been presented here. And this can be used for contact tracing for the recent pandemic. Any comment on how your work can be applied to this important domain? So I think we have 2 authors of this distributed human mobility modeling paper join us now. And Jie, are you with us from the PMF paper? Jie Feng? Jie, are you with us now? Okay. How about the second distributed human mobility modeling papers author? Zipei, are you with us?
Yes,
I see you now. Okay, can you comment a little bit about the question I just read out?
Yes. Okay, thank you. So, thanks for the questions, and I think it is a very interesting topic, and I believe that decentralized human mobility modeling could be used for contact tracking. In our work, and we are focused on applying federated learning for the distributed human mobility modeling. And if we have some task, like for example, predicting predicting how many users this user will meet or will contact, and I think that could be very helpful. And yes, and if you, for example, only for the contact tracking, and if you do not involve many machine learning model or predictive model, and I think maybe it is more related to some traditional privacy preserving models, like for example, if you differential privacy or blockchains or such techniques. Okay, that's all for my answer.
Okay, thank you. I think we have another question related to this. Let me put it here. So in this session, we have a few papers on the distributed human modeling. and any interesting application for this particular setting, or this is more related to the privacy. So I think the question is more like, is there more generic application that's only specific to this particular setting, distributed, compared to the centralized, or this, the main motivation is about the privacy here?
Yeah, I think yeah, we are continuing on this this topic, and I think there are more. There should be more applications for the decentralized predictions than the centralized predictions, and I believe that in the future that for the decentralized we can collecting more information from the users, and because for the smartphone, it's becoming more and more powerful sensors of the humans' activities or humans' behaviors, and maybe for the centralized predictions, maybe centralized prediction, maybe it is hard to collect all the sensors readings from the cell phones, user cell phones to the centralized server, and maybe because some of the information maybe it is too privacy, and if we develop more decentralized and privacy preserving prediction, maybe we can get more sensors data and more data from the users, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So Jie, are you with us from the PMF paper? It seems you connect to the audio.
Okay.
So can you comment a little bit about the last question? It's more like when you do the distributed human mobility modeling, it's more because you have some important application that only work in this setting, or is it because of the privacy issue is the main reason?
Actually, okay, I see.
I think because I think the privacy will be an easy argument, right? When you do the distributed kind of human mobility modeling. But
yes.
So the question here, maybe they try to understand, is there any particular application scenario that only work in this distributed setting instead of a centralized setting?
Okay. In our work, we have several design for protecting the privacy in human mobility prediction. Actually, I think maybe the first one, like using facilitated learning to predict human mobility, and the third one, use personal data to build personal model for human mobility prediction. These two designs are common and can be generalized to other scenarios. But the second design, like different privacy in geospatial data, I think this is specific to this scenario. And maybe if we need to apply this technique to other scenario, we need some other modification. Yeah.
I see. Thank you. So let's move to the next question. So I put here on the box. Many of the paper in this session have focused on this semantic location, for example, floor ID or POI, rather than the absolute GPS position. Is this a trend or is this a coincidence? So probably we can ask the first, actually, the floor ID paper, right? So the floor, I think the question called the storyteller,
I will
right?
gladly answer.
Yeah.
Yes. So actually, I think it's rather a necessity because we're focusing on location indoors, inside buildings, and inside buildings without knowing the floor. Most buildings have hundreds of floors or tens of floors. So without knowing the floor, a 2D location or GPS location inside the building is not does not provide a lot of information, especially as GPS does not work indoors. So we assume that the building is known. We know the building where the user is, but the goal is to first determine the floor ID of the user, and then maybe later, as an extension to the work, we can simultaneously predict the floor and the 2D location inside the floor relative to the coordinate system of the building.
Thank you. So
I hope this answers the question.
So I think there's a follow-up question for you. I just put it there in the chat box. So I think somehow you answered a partial of it. So the question is, any reason why you are predicting the floor rather than the specific area or zones of the floor? And also, what are the accuracy like when the floor area is pretty large? And if it's poor due to the large area, so this specific area or zone make more, is this setting make more sense? Can you try to answer those follow-up questions?
Yes, sure. First of all, concerning the first part of the question, I'm actually predicting the floor. This can be done in multiple ways, either predict the floor ID and then the 2D location, or predict them simultaneously. So for this paper, we're focusing on predicting the floor ID, and later on, the work can be extended to simultaneously predict the floor ID and the 2D location. Concerning the second part of the question, actually, this is already implemented, but maybe it was not clear in the presentation. We do handle larger areas through the virtual building I was talking about in the presentation. This essentially, cuts out a smaller building from the actual building, so it limits the area to only the area that is surrounding the strongest access point. This will be the area that is most critical to the localization process. So this is actually already implemented.
I see. Thank you. So we have another paper. Please, you want to, do you have any follow-ups? No, okay. I think we have another paper about the indoor localization, right? The Mel paper. Can the author briefly comment a little bit about when you do the localization, are you using the absolute location, or you have this landmark or like POI to decide the location of the user?
We thank you for this interesting question. We use the accurate location of the user on the floor plan, like the X, Y of the user instead of the POI. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We have conducted a site survey and draw a detailed floor plan, digital floor plan of our trial site, and yeah, we estimate the XY location of the user. Yes.
Perfect.
That's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, let's move to the next question. Next question is about the federated learning paper. So how long does it take to train a model with sufficient accuracy? Does it take a longer time than a traditional neural networks? Jie, can you briefly comment on this?
Okay. Actually, if we do use pattern learning in human-related prediction models, based on my practice, I think it will take longer time than traditional model, because we need to it based on the simulation level of your work on different individual clients. If you simulate many clients and many individual clients and train a local model for each client, and it will take too much time in fine learning. And actually, for example, we use simulation for client in our work, and we take maybe two or three times compared with traditional model training.
Okay, thank you for your answering here. So let me move to the next question because we only have 2 minutes left. So to all the papers, how did you adjust the noise? How do you address the noise of the mobility or the location data in your paper? So anyone care to answer? Because I think this is a question applied to all the papers. Anyone has any ideas in your paper? How did you address the noise for the mobility data or location data? So how about I try to kill the answer a little bit. I think for the navigation, indoor navigation, Chun, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
So compared to other paper, I think your paper, the data you have is more noisy, right? Because those are like a signal level data, right? Can you just briefly comment how do you deal with the noise here? Noise.
Well, we have several approaches. First, instead of using the raw geomagnetic signals in our paper, we calculate the gradient of the geomagnetic sequences. Therefore, we are able to reduce the impact of additive noises. Secondly, we use the neural networks and a bunch of training data. So in our experiences, we are able to reduce the impact of noises using more training data. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So
Thank
Yu,
you.
are you with us? The stationary sensing system?
Yes.
Can you briefly comment in your data set, do you have any noise or how do you filter them out? And how that impact your result?
Okay, so in my data set, the main noise comes from the vehicle's GPS. So my work is based on the vehicle's GPS. So the main thing I did is to do the map matching. I wanted to map the vehicle's GPS to the road network. In that case, so even there is some offset, like a very long distance offset, I can still like filter out these kind of GPS points. So after that, so the data we use that for the in this paper.
Okay, thank you. So since we have one kind of question last, probably let me try to read it out loud. So for this learning hometown and current city paper, how many city pairs have you selected in your paper? And when you picking them, those pairs, have you considered the cultural difference and the distance between the cities? So is Arthur with us today? Okay, I think this question also can be applied to the dynamic resource allocation paper. So I think the author probably with us. Sijie, are you with us?
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Because let me first read a question.
Right? Yeah, in your paper, you also have this trash bin, right? So in a certain area, I think Happy Valley, right? Can you comment a little bit about why you select area and how many trash bin you selected? And have you considered, for example, the geometry or location of those trash bin when you actually select them for your paper, when you do your evaluation?
Well, actually, in our work, there is only one Happy Valley in Beijing. The reason is that we only, this is the only data available that we crowd from Tencent and WeChat heat map. So I maybe I cannot very clearly to answer the question about two different cities.
Two cities is fine, but for you, right? So you have that, if you remember correctly, in your presentation, you have area with a lot of trash bins, right? So you select all of them. I think, did you actually, select them based on any criteria, or that's all the data set you have, you select all of them?
Well, the trash bin we collected are from our manually on-field investigation. So we collect all the trash bins in the theme park. That is our one of deployment baseline. It is our current deployment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it seems the paper for the hometown and the current city author is not with us. And I will try to answer this question based on my understanding of the paper. So essentially, I think they get the data from the service provider. I think they use the WeChat data. When they get the service provider, WeChat, I think, is a very popular service in China. Theoretically, they should be able to get access to all the data, all the cities, because essentially, I think in all the major cities in China, and they will have the WeChat user. When they actually select the cities, I think mainly they select the city, should be with a high quality, right? If I were them, okay. So I don't know their criteria, but let me try to answer this. If I am the author, how should I, select those cities? Probably they will consider different cultural difference. For example, Beijing should be one, probably Shanghai could be one, and Shenzhen, those major cities. And also because it's given that migration, annually migration patterns in China, right? So for example, during the Spring Festival, probably they will select some city with a lot of outflow compared to the inflow during certain specific time. So those are also pretty interesting scenario for them to understand. And also in terms of the distance, I think some of the major cities in China, for example, Beijing and Shanghai, are pretty far away. and Shanghai, and I think Shenzhen and Guangzhou, they are pretty far away, but Guangzhou and Shenzhen, they are pretty close. I think author use one city in Jinan, probably or Tianjin, that's pretty close to Beijing. I think from that perspective, author probably select the city pair with both the short distance and the long distance, try to generalize their method to different kind of setting. That's just my guess about how the author will actually select those data set. Hopefully, we will actually answer your question. I think our online chat remind us the session already up, and we have a social event just started at 6:30, and in the I think in the gathering town hall. So please feel free to join. So I want to thank again for all the answers and all the audience. Thank you very much.